G'day, it's Jimmy Barnes here. 13 years ago, a TV producer thought it'd be a good idea to make a series about a choir of homeless people. They were called the Choir of Hard Knocks, and they became a sensation. Front and center of their choir was their choir master, Jonathon Welch. Now, after more than a decade with the group, Jonathon is handing over the baton to focus on people who need him even more. This is Jonathon's story.
I want my final Choir of Hard Knocks concert at Melbourne Town Hall to be something really spectacular and huge and memorable, just as the first concert was 12 or so years ago.
Have you signed your...
And I'm really hoping that I can try and raise some funds, you know, to help keep the choir singing.
Okay, ladies, hair done? Yeah. Lippy, all done.
All done.
All done. Hair, lipstick.
We didn't know the choir would be as big as it turned out to be. It became a household name.
We're just about ready.
Gig time.
Gig time, so yes.
We thought the television series would run and the choir would end, but it turned into a big family.
I'm really excited about it. I'm very excited for the choir. It's going to be a big celebration. A lot of people have said to me, you know, you could have just gone after the television series, but I couldn't do that. If I get upset, they'll get upset, and they've got to keep singing. And it's hard to sing when you cry, can I tell you?
For Jonathon to leave the Choir of Hard Knocks, it always had to be something very big.
Ready?
But now he does have to look after his own family that needs him very, very much.
You want a hug too? You big old softie. There have absolutely been times when we've both wondered what the heck we got ourselves into.
Oh, shit.
And it's been the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life.
And here he is, the man himself, the founder of the Choir of Hard Knocks, Jonathon Welch.
For Jonathon Welch to be still rocking up there 12 years on, from when that ragtag bunch of singers, arrived at a nondescript hall in suburbia, is amazing.
My back certainly hurts a lot more when I do this now. So it's shooby-doo-wop, wop, wop, wop.
You don't meet many people with that amount of determination and compassion and love for people and music.
Have a go now. I don't really care what your background is or where you come from. We're human beings that have come together in unison to make harmony.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes.
I know I'm a slave driver. I will be to the very last note you sing. Leading up to, you know, any concert is busy, but it's kind of not real yet for me. I still cry, you know, 13 years on, but they're tears of joy these days. You know, 13 years ago, there were tears of frustration.
In 2005, a producer named Jason Stevens brought the idea for a television series called The Choir of Hard Knocks to the ABC.
I was working for a production company called Fremantle Media, and my job essentially was to come up with ideas for TV shows. I'd always been quite fascinated by choirs. Living in Melbourne during that time, 2005, the homelessness problem was more obvious, I guess, and I kind of thought it'd be interesting to put those two ideas together to see whether we could make a choir out of homeless and disadvantaged people.
I fell in love with the idea, not necessarily because it was about a choir, but I could see it as a vehicle for learning about homelessness and through the prism of music. I think my colleagues at the ABC thought I was slightly insane, slightly lost the plot, because they couldn't quite see how it was going to work. But they backed it.
Then I read that a man called Jonathon Welch had set up his own choir in Sydney called the Sydney Street Choir. I basically rang up Jonathon, introduced myself and said this was my idea. I think he was a little bit sceptical at first. I think he felt that he didn't want to be, partake in a show that was going to be exploiting any choir members.
One of the things that I felt it was very important to have was a charity to help see us through the time with filming, but also on the other end, when we finished filming, to help keep the choir going.
It needed to have the backing of psychologists. These people were vulnerable and are vulnerable. And so we couldn't possibly just go, yay, here come the cameras, bye.
Talk, yes, mate.
The ABC and Fremantle chose RecLink, a charity that had worked with homeless people in the past, as the charity that would work with the choir. Their job was to make sure that the choir members had somewhere to turn to if things went bad.
Choir of Hard Knocks started as a television construct, very much so. I can hear noises out there.
We'd done a huge job in putting posters all around Melbourne, putting the word out to a lot of organisations that supported homeless people, but we didn't know who was going to turn up.
I'm not going to remember all your names. Well, hi, Belinda. How are you going? Hilton. Hilton. How are you? As in Paris? No, tell.
And there was one day, very early on the piece, where the choir were, I think, rehearsing for the first time. And Jonathon was taking them through their paces, and they didn't sound that great.
Gone are the dark clouds that make me blind. It's going to be a bright, sunshiny day.
I mean, they sounded horrific, really. I mean, everybody was out of tune. Everybody was singing their own songs at different beats and at different volumes.
Sunshiny day. Woo! What a noise, my goodness.
It's kind of like throwing open the doors into a cupboard. I had to see what was on the shelves, and even though it was rough, I could really, it was something I could really work with it.
Can you remember where you're all standing? Just come on in. We'll get you all sorted out.
It was a bit of a rabble, and so Jonathon was very capable in being able to get the tenors to sit with the tenors and the basses to sit with the basses, and he moved everybody around.
That's it. Just come in front of Alan.
Something magical happened.
Bells in the air, in the whisper of the tree.
Jason Stevens and I looked at each other and we had a tear in our eyes and went, they've got a voice.
Jesus, Lord, at thy birth.
I could listen to you sing all day. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. She reminded me of my mother.
I grew up within this very dysfunctional family house. Music became this wonderful world where I could just lose myself. And I literally, I suppose, through singing, found my voice. In the 1970s, when everybody was listening to ABBA, I was out the back playing Pavarotti records. My parents were married about 25 years before they divorced, and that was in the late 60s, early 70s, which was quite unheard of back in those days. I know when my father left when I was about 11, it certainly devastated me. My sister Libby is 3 years younger than me, and in those following years, Libby became very difficult for my mother to manage. She became quite defiant, and she would do everything that she could to run away from home. I remember my brother and I looking on the streets of Ripponlea and the stations and things, trying to find her. I suppose that was my first kind of experience of perhaps what homelessness was. Of somebody sleeping any other place other than in our home.
Jonathon left Melbourne at the age of 22 to pursue a career in music.
I was offered chorus positions at Australian Opera, and eventually I got a Young Artist Scholarship.
Impossible, madame. No.
1,000 francs if you do.
1,000 francs? Of course, madame.
I had 5 or 6 years with the company, and I just felt somehow that I needed to move on. I really wanted to do my own thing. Meeting Matt, it's like a Mills and Boon love story. We met on the Love Boat between Sydney and Auckland. I was performing with a wonderful group called Tenor Australis, and we got onto this ship, and there was Matt.
We made eye contact on the ship as we were leaving Sydney Harbour. And so I pursued him.
Matt and I were together for 3 or 4 days. I got off the ship, kind of waved him goodbye and thought, oh my God, am I ever going to see this man again?
That was in December of 2000, and by April of 2001, I'd sold everything I owned, quit my job, and moved to Australia.
No pressure. Thank you very much. We're very pleased to be here this afternoon to entertain you.
The Choir of Hard Knocks was commissioned before the days of juggernaut reality shows where everything has to be plotted to within an inch of its life. Instead, we set the camera rolling to see what would happen.
Don't blame it on the sunshine, and don't blame it on the moonlight, and don't blame it on the good times, blame it on the wicked.
It was a very intense 6 months of filming. I think we filmed over 400 hours.
I think the choir gave Jonathon a purpose, a sense of direction that he may not have had before.
I heard there was a secret chord. I wanted to give everybody a fair go and have a listen to them.
We were dealing with some of the most vulnerable people in the community. What was very important to me was about giving them the power back. So many of them had that power and that voice taken away from them.
I was quite heavily an alcoholic for about 6 years. I was in a detox. I was sitting on the floor in full-blown self-pity, I think you could say, and there was a few workers outside the door that said, oh my goodness, is that you singing in there? And they sort of said, look, there's this choir of Hard Knocks, would you like to go and rehearse for this choir? And I thought, yeah, that would be a cool idea.
But it's something that I must believe in, and it's there when I look in your eyes.
Beautiful. Belinda, that's all I need. It's beautiful.
All right.
It's just a confidence thing, isn't it?
I knew he had a big challenge on his hands with a lot of us, and because, yeah, some of the addicts in the choir, including myself, we were hard work. We were real hard work.
Just, struggling to accept compliments, that's what we're...
Oh, mate, that's a pleasure.
But it's good, yeah. To be able to go to the Choir of Hard Knocks and sing and be part of a community seems like a really good idea. I started using drugs from when I was about 14.
That's a pleasure.
It's been amazing. And by the time I was 18, I was starting to use drugs intravenously and started getting into heroin and amphetamines later on. I needed something positive in my life, and to have that as a goal.
It was very obvious from day one that the music was starting to help them open up emotionally, which brought in a whole other can of worms.
So when you've got all this shit going on in your life, singing is another way of finding some sort of relief. There was always something going on, and there was always spot fires that had to be attended to.
When I'm fighting, I'll be throwing punches, and then you'll know I'm fighting.
No punches around here. Coming on in here.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jimmy Barnes.
When I heard the idea for the show, I wasn't sure about how I would connect with it. I went through a period where I became seriously serious, you know, the bad alcoholic and a drug addict. The minute I sang with them, I broke down and cried. It was just so beautiful. And I think that's what people connected with that choir.
Oh, the flame trees will blind the weary traveler.
Jimmy Barnes.
Jimmy Barnes, yeah.
Not my type.
Not your type?
It's scream.
I just can't control my feet. I just can't control my feet.
It took on a life of its own. The choir became a major musical phenomenon from the first episode. Literally, I think it was the next day we got a phone call from the Sydney Opera House.
Oh, in front of us.
Oh my God, it's humongous.
We're going to go inside of that.
Nervous. Cramping and sweating.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
The series was incredibly successful. We didn't see it coming. And it did bring its own stresses because people went from being unknown, big issue sellers, people who lived on the street with no profile, to being recognised. And that's freaky.
I've hardly been outside my room in days, 'cause I don't feel that I deserve the sunshine's rays.
That was my song to my daughter. Halfway through that performance, I nearly broke down in tears. I was struggling alcohol and struggling to lose her to foster care. It was huge. It was really huge.
If we could only see each other, we'll breathe together. These arms will not be taught to hold another's, as we're the special two.
For a number of the choir members, when you've experienced disadvantage all your life, to be thrust into the public light, to be famous, is a real challenge in itself. And I think some of them didn't understand that challenge. We didn't understand the challenge.
But I will fight for you.
It was a blessing in some aspects. It was a curse in others. We were suddenly famous, and people thought I was making all this money, and they waited till I went to the Sydney Opera House to perform to come in and rob my house. So I lost my house after that and ended up on the street for nearly 7 years.
As long as the choir is keep on going, Rob.
Absolutely. You have my promise.
The Choir of Hard Knocks put homelessness and music in the headlines all round Australia. They were in demand everywhere.
Ladies and gentlemen, on this historic night, would you please remain standing for the Australian National Anthem to be performed by the Choir of Hard Knocks.
It wasn't until the television series came out we received such attention. I think Choir of Hard Knocks did about 120 concerts in the first 18 months. It was huge.
And the TV Week Logie goes to Choir of Hard Knocks.
And there were significant funds that came in. I mean, we don't know, still to this day. I would imagine it would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Jonathon Welch.
I think there was misunderstandings that perhaps cash might go back to the choir. But that was never quite possible because of the way that the deal was set up.
It's indeed a great honour to stand here tonight to represent the choir.
David from Reclink had promised that he would be transparent with the choir members about the funds, and that didn't happen. Behind closed doors, the choir members became very angry and wanted to know what was happening and what the funds were and how they were being managed.
To everybody who's out there watching, who's homeless or experienced disadvantage, this is for you too. Thank you very much.
Who was going to speak up for them if I didn't?
All the money that RecLink received went back into running the choir and RecLink programs. And when it became successful, we were able to set up other choirs around the country.
RecLink was saying it was a philosophical difference. Basically, they saw the money was theirs, and the Choir of Hard Knocks saw the money was theirs. I chose to resign from them because I just couldn't work with them. So pretty much the entire choir, I think bar one, decided to walk away from the charity, to walk away from the name, to walk away from the money. And I think that's the biggest statement that the choir members could have ever possibly made.
Yeah, I'm okay. I know you're struggling, and you know you can call me or Jenny anytime. And it was difficult for us to let the choir go.
So I think we deserve a big group hug.
Yet it was the right thing to do. And I think it was the right thing to do for the participants, to actually let them go and follow their dream.
We also lost the Choir of Hard Knocks name, which was licensed to RecLink by Fremantle Media.
We say goodbye to the Choir of Hard Knocks name forever. Would you please welcome the Choir of Hope and Inspiration?
We've only got one platter out, so throw your...
Is there bread I can butter?
No, no.
The loss of the name hurt the choir a lot because people just thought the choir disappeared and had folded.
It'll be an afternoon concert, that's all I know.
We weren't getting the phone calls that we used to. It took a while for the public to realise that we were still out there.
So we finish about 1:30?
Yeah, we'll finish early today, and then we've got the 2 weeks off. And then
Jonathon and I decided to put some money into it ourselves and keep it running and rely on performances to bring the rest of the money in.
A little bit chunky, but that's all right.
It was risky, I think, but it was something that we wanted to do and we felt very strongly about.
The heavens open up, the sun comes shining down.
After 6 years, we did get the name back and it's licensed back to the choir, which is fantastic.
What are we going to watch tonight, boys, on television?
Things have changed personally a lot for Matt and I the last 2.5 years.
You want to start dressing your pizza, Cooper?
Matt and Jonathon always had in their mind that they would like children, and that came about in a most surprising way.
Oh, yeah. That's all you do. Oh, you don't want to use your hands?
Yeah. December 2016, we got a call and we were told that they were in desperate need of somebody to look after Jonathon's nephews, that their home life had broken down and that they needed some place urgently for the boys to go.
All right, boys, we got about 15 to 20 minutes. I'll just leave mine.
This is a funny bit.
Riley and Cooper are my great-nephews, and in fact, they're my younger sister Libby's grandchildren. Sadly, there's a history of mental health issues that have been in my family, and the living conditions for the boys that they were in just became very unstable.
I didn't even know that the boys existed, so we'd never met the boys.
Come on. Okay.
Initially, we're in shock. We decided for Riley to come and stay with us.
Probably the worst.
He was excited about going to live with Uncle Jonathon. And when we got there, he had his belongings in a plastic bag and grabbed our hand and was ready to go.
Okay, your turn, Cooper. Did you draw
two? Sorry.
Cooper moved in within 6 months of Riley moving in.
Can I get any more? No, don't. We just fell in love with them, and they kind of fell in love with us. And like any family, we certainly have our moments. And we've had to learn a lot, though, about children who've been through trauma. Oh, what a beautiful day. It's just great. It's the local paper. It was very important for us, now that we've got the boys, that they would be honoured through our legal marriage together.
Oh, lots of good houses.
Nice, relaxing.
The proposal was very funny. Matt had no idea. We went to Paris. We were in this little crowded restaurant near the Eiffel Tower. I was trying to get down on one knee. And all our friends thought I was having a heart attack. I was kind of sliding underneath the table.
So they were very worried about him, and he pulled out a ring and asked me to marry him. I was totally floored, had no idea it was coming.
It is the first equality marriage at any church in Australia.
We decided to get married on Easter Saturday.
It is my great pleasure to proclaim that they are now husband and husband.
We felt it was very important to include the boys in this day.
Would you all hold hands?
Publicly, we were able to declare to them that they were a very... I'm going to cry now. That's such an important part of our lives. It was about the four of us.
As you become one family united in love.
We do. The boys obviously need our time as much as we can possibly give. We made the decision for Matt predominantly to stay at home, to be their home dad, if you like. Bye. Bye. Love you, Riley. They're not happy about me being out at nights rehearsing and working on weekends. I do feel like I'm missing out on a lot.
Jonathon's actually been thinking about leaving the choir for a couple of years. He wants to be able to spend more time at home with me and the boys. So yeah, it's been a tough decision.
Well, I'm going to start getting emotional in that bit.
This is making you emotional. Oh, Jonathan.
It is. But
sorry, we
it's
don't mean
something...
to upset you, but...
No, not at all. But they're tears of joy because it's time for me to move on with my life. Thank you. We're going to have fun, aren't we? Yeah. There'll be lots of hugs and kisses, and remember, I'm not dying, OK? I'm still going to be around.
The choir of Hard Knocks did save a few lives, I'm sure of it, and it's returned a few people to a better life.
I decided it'd be great fun to go back and be part of the celebration of sending Jonathon off.
I'm totally excited. Here we are, 13 years on. They've packed it out again.
Here we go.
Chins up.
Here we go. Last time.
Jonathan really saw something in me. He saw that I was genuinely trying to get back on track. I've been clean now for just over 9 years. And just be able to walk down the street, not looking for something easy to steal, to get that fix that I needed to have, but just to be able to walk down the street and smile and know that I've made it to the other side.
I don't think Jonathon will ever not be involved with the choir. He's not going to be there on a day or a weekly basis now conducting the choir, but he'll be in the background helping make decisions.
I still remember when I used to be 9 years old. Yeah.
I want the choir to continue for many years to come, and it will be different and will change. We're not sure what that's going to look like yet into the future, but I hope the public will continue to support the choir as well too, because they love singing so much.
Shout, shout.